Our session is about growth unlocked from LatAm to the world. 200 companies are valued over 50 billion. And I want to talk about these two companies that are Latin American. One is Mercado Libre, that's about 100 billion in market cap. And another one is a recent company that started 10 years ago, that is Nubank. So very often we think about the Latin market. Originally, the topic was called frontier market. But as we were discussing, actually, I want to go deeper today with these two really iconic giants that has put their entire time, wealth, network into the opportunity of LatAm and venture. I want to give them the justice in the next 20 minutes, not only on their insights on LatAm, but also their knowledge in cross-border, and most importantly, their long-standing relationship. I know Marcelo and also Ambassador Cliff has this very good relationship that invest in each other, that devote time with each other. So I think that will really unlock a lot of the insights they have from LatAm and the world. So first, I'm going to start with Marcelo, a very quick introduction. It's a global entrepreneur and investor, founder and CEO of Claure Group, a multi-billion-dollar global investment firm spanning multiple high-growth sectors in AI, climate, energy transition, fashion and entertainment, and sports. I'm also co-chair of Harvard Digital Data Design Institute, which is really important because AI is going to reshape businesses, and he's at the forefront with the key people there. Executive chairman of Bicycle Capital, a Latin America-focused growth fund. He immigrated from Bolivia. I know many of you might not have heard of a very small country, but has really built an empire by starting a business that became later CEO, the CEO of Sprint, and then did the merger with T-Mobile. Today, that's like the largest telecom company that's there, and because of that, joined SoftBank as the COO and became the CEO of the SoftBank Group International, where he had direct oversight of the SoftBank operating companies. He launched an $8 billion SoftBank Latin America fund, and that has made a dent in the Latin America market. Following, we have Ambassador Cliff, also an amazing operator. He started Voice over IP, a business, and that went IPO. It's not to phone. He's today still the chairman, and their relationship is really close to SoftBank because I know when Ambassador Cliff and I were talking, I think when he was thinking about his sort of retirement, he started a business that was extremely profitable and flew to Tokyo to talk to Masa-san. And then it was really great business for all of the partners that were involved. And today, he's a co-founding partner of Valor Capital Group, a growth equity venture firm investment in the US, in LatAm, and also cross-border. And previously, I named him as ambassador because he's Ambassador Sobel served a United States ambassador to the Netherlands and to Brazil as well under both Bush and Obama administration. So today what we're going to do is talk about this really interesting cross between operator, investor, understanding of also ambassador on the geopolitical component of how this is shaping the flow of capital, the flow of talent with that. So I'll start with Marcelo. You're a world-class operator, and you know a lot about value creation. Your partner described you as momentum creator, and I think that's such a great way to define who you are. And you're putting your network and wealth into venture and Latin America. Can you tell us why?
So first, thank you for having us. And anytime that we have a chance to talk about Latin America, it's a pleasure. I'm incredibly passionate about what Latin America is all about, but also think that Latin America time is critical right now. And I don't think it's because Latin America has actually planned it, but because what is going on in the world that's going to put in Latin America in a different stage. If you follow all the geopolitical issues that we have between China and the United States, suddenly nearshoring had become a reality. And it's not the nearshoring that we traditionally knew, which were people manufacturing cheap goods in the border and then putting them inside the U.S. Today, Latin America, Mexico especially, you have most of the most important companies in the world relocating their supply chain to Mexico to basically serve the United States market. And you have semiconductor plants, you have electric vehicles, batteries, high-tech companies basically moving to Mexico. And for the first time in I don't know how many years, Mexico is now the largest trading partner to the U.S. So even if Mexico tries to get it wrong or screw it up, it's going to be very difficult because of the momentum and because of the role they play within the U.S. economy. And then secondly, today we're living a time where if we believe half the commitment that we've made towards net zero emission, it's going to be important, the electrification of the world. And Latin America is also incredibly lucky that we have most of the lithium and most of the copper in the world. It's located in Latin America. So that's going to bring a tremendous amount of inflow of foreign direct investments. And thirdly, another phenomenon is the world is growing from 7 to 9 billion people, and somebody's going to have to feed those additional 2 billion people. And Brazil positions itself as one of the largest food producers in the world. So these countries are incredibly lucky and privileged to be sitting on incredible natural resources or in a specific location in the side of Mexico, which means, from a macro trend perspective, we have an incredible amount of tailwinds that are going to help the region excel in terms of macro trends. And then when you look at what is going on from a monetary policy, Latin America has performed extremely well from an inflation perspective. And Latin America, as you said, have been able to produce some amazing entrepreneurs today. One thing that I love about Latin America is something that very few people know from an investment perspective, is the capital that's been invested is an incredibly efficient capital. For every dollar of capital that has been invested in Latin America, it has yielded the highest amount of exit of any emerging market, meaning that Latin American entrepreneurs have had a harder time raising capital and thereby have been able to produce incredibly efficient businesses. Like you said, Mercado Libre, Nubank, Globant, and there's probably 5 or 6 other companies on track to do IPOs as soon as the IPO market opens up. There are going to be iconic companies in the world. So I'm incredibly bullish in Latin America because of everything that's going on. And, no better way I say it than I not only invest through one of the venture funds that we have, which is Bicycle Capital, but also most of my own capital today sits in making investments in Latin America across all different asset classes.
Amazing. Thank you, Marcelo. Ambassador Cliff, especially from your angle of advising several government initiatives and dialogue, and also being an ambassador for so many years, I would love you to sort of also give some light. Of course, we heard a lot about the Latin American opportunity. Can you also dive a little bit deeper? Why venture?
Well, let me say, I think I have a unique focus on Latin America because I did serve in the Netherlands, as you mentioned. And the societies are totally different. The Dutch were very mercantile and not risk takers. And what's very clear in Latin America is the comfort of innovation, entrepreneurship, and being risk takers, which is really important. I think that the most interesting observation is, given the growing importance of the region, the advent of the swing states, those that have capital resources, natural resources, have the ability to nearshore, has created a significant amount of value. But in a multipolar world, countries like Mexico and Brazil are critically important to ultimate decision-making. And Latin America is seizing upon that opportunity, but more importantly, finally, and I'm using the word finally, the United States is focusing on the opportunity. For instance, there's a new bill in Congress sponsored by Senator Cassidy and Senator Bennett, called the Americas Act, which is talking about $70 billion to help in nearshoring, creating jobs and opportunity, not only in Mexico, but in the Western Hemisphere. And while I was ambassador, there was always a lot of talk about the growing importance of Latin America. It never really matured. And today, because of a multitude of reasons, being a breadbasket for the world, having rare earths, being closer to the United States, I think that those synergies are creating historic opportunities which we're only at the beginning of. Venture capital investing is an important asset class. It's only been around for 10 years, but the growth of venture investing is significantly more than India, the United States, or any other geographical region, because the opportunities are there now. And I want to put a marker down before we finish this conversation, and that is that Brazil is leading the world in financial democratization. And perhaps we can talk about that, because it's really quite remarkable. You asked a question at one point in time, has Brazil or Latin America unlocked value, or is it still a frontier? And it depends upon the topic.
And let's dive a little bit deeper on like the cross-border opportunities, right? Can we maybe like double click, like with the growth that we've seen, and Ambassador, you mentioned a little bit at the almost like tipping point with opportunities that we have. How to look at opportunities if we take U.S. aside on the nearshoring opportunities, like opportunities between the Middle East and Latin America, or Marcelo, you're vice chairman of Shein, which is a massive Chinese company, also was quite involved when you were with SoftBank, with like Alibaba. So you have such a global operator sort of experience, right? Like what are the cross-border, like ex-US, like as Chinese Brazilian, I always feel like there is definitely a lot more like interaction, capital source, talent source, opportunity, thinking from like a cross-border perspective.
So from a cross-border perspective, I like to say that we're living, again, because of the geopolitical issues that we have today, you have a tremendous amount of Asian companies. And to clarify, Shein is a Singaporean company that manufactures in China, that does business in Latin America, but it's a perfect example of an Asian company who saw an opportunity in the market, and today the Latin American market for Shein is the fastest growing markets that we have. It's one of the largest, top 5, both Mexico and Brazil. And it's been proven that Latin America is a digital economy. And the reason why there's digital, because everything is broken in Latin America, so technology tends to fix things. And in many cases, fashion was so expensive, wasn't available to the masses, and suddenly you have Shein, who's an incredibly efficient company, shows up in Latin America. And just to share some numbers, we have in Brazil alone over 45 million customers who buy their products, their fashion products, and become the most loved brand in the country. And because of the success of Shein, you have a lot of different Asian companies today who are making it a point as their next expansion market becomes Latin America. And this thing that people don't understand about Latin America is size. It's expected both Mexico and Brazil to be top 10, economies in the world in the next few years. And by 2050, top 5 and top 6 economies in the world. So these are large economies in which people make the same amount of money as China, which is 3 times the amount of money that people make in India. So you have size, you have ability to purchase. So suddenly it becomes a great place for Asian companies to basically come into Latin America. And then the role of the Middle East is suddenly they've decided that they do want to invest in Latin America. Mubarala is my partner in the growth equity fund that we have in Latin America. Mubarala has been in Brazil for a few years. And they are not shy at saying that they expect a tremendous amount of growth in terms of their investment portfolio. We're doing one of the largest conferences ever in the next couple of weeks in Brazil, in which we're taking 1,000 investors, and we're super excited to show those investors what Brazil is all about. And that is a conference that's usually hosted by the government of Saudi Arabia. So you have the Emirati government, the Qatari government, the Saudi government, or these sovereign funds now putting a special focus in Latin America. So you have capital from the Middle East, and you have Asian companies bringing their product. You have Chinese companies trying to buy all the natural resources. And finally, you have a U.S. who's being completely sleepy and says, wow, if I don't do anything about it, suddenly I'm going to completely lose a region that was 100% U.S. And to be fair, the U.S. has lost most relevance to Latin America. And I'm glad you got a couple of politicians in the U.S. who are trying to finally pass some sort of act and put some money. But it's crazy to see how, you have Chinese, you have Middle East, and you have Asian companies going to Latin America while the U.S. has pretty much been slept.
It's interesting to segue from that, talking about where the United States is not leading and should be leading. And it goes back to that financial democratization, blockchain, international settlements, KYC. You can go right down the list. And it's amazing that so much of this is coming out of a country like Brazil, where the governor of the Central Bank of Brazil, Governor Campos, has won Best Central Banker in the world 3 out of the last 4 years. And the only reason why he didn't win it this year is because the bank itself was designated the best central bank in the world. So off of that comes a lot of opportunities for venture investing, for creation of new digital banks, new bank you mentioned earlier. So there is a lot of value creation. But what we're seeing, going back to MENA and the Middle East, is when Lula made his trip to China, the first country he visited coming back to Brazil was the UAE. He recently went to Riyadh and made a speech talking about, well, should Embraer be producing in Saudi Arabia? Maybe so, maybe not. But the advent of the swing states working closer together without intermediaries like the United States or China or others is clearly a pathway for the future. And I think, as Marcelo pointed out, the natural allies of MENA, Gulf states, Riyadh, and Brazil and Latin America are very clear and will only become more robust in the future. And we are a cross-border fund. We see opportunities in countries both here and abroad.
Ambassador, can you talk a little bit? Of course, your fund is, I think a lot of the Valor it's you starting with your ambassador sort of voice. So there's a lot of cross-border. And Marcelo now just mentioned there's a component of capital, there's a component of market size. But I also know both of you, and I think recently with Valor, you also brought a very important general partner, Dan, who was a CEO of Global PayPal. So you talk about the disruption in financial service. Can you give us sort of some insights of how to attract talent such as Dan to be part of the fund and sort of the exciting piece of this reshaping in financial service, right?
We live in a very exciting world, a very dynamic world, and we haven't gotten, and we probably won't have the time to talk about how Marcelo and I met, where SoftBank, Ron Fisher specifically asked if I would talk to Marcelo about venture opportunities in Latin America. And it was an extraordinary dinner that has created a friendship that has lasted ever since, despite being stuck in your elevator in your apartment, which is a story for another day. But Dan Schulman, former CEO of PayPal, founded Priceline, did Virgin Mobile, and many, many other opportunities in his life, I think was attracted not only by our team, but the opportunity of what is being created in Latin America. And that's why Marcelo is doing what he's doing. We are now soon to have our 8th fund in the region. And I think we're just at the inception point of it. We mentioned FII, Davos in the Desert, doing their first conference at Copacabana in Rio next month. It's interesting that Mike Milken is doing his first conference in Mexico City in October. So the region clearly is becoming a hub of opportunity that it's fun to be part of.
And the one intersection I also know, Marcelo, you're like more, I think today it's almost impossible to think about investments without thinking AI. So I'd love to hear more of like opportunities around AI. And then also, Ambassador, you mentioned a little more on climate, and both of you talk about climate. On sort of this intersection point and LatAm, what type of opportunities are you seeing from an investment perspective?
No, I think we would be stretching if we said that Latin America is a place to invest in AI.
Okay.
But let's park those two separate things, right? I do believe, and I am very public in terms of saying that I believe AI, it is by far the largest value creation opportunity we're ever going to see in this generation and many generations to come. And there's an incredible amount of investment being deployed around the world in AI. Mm-hmm. What I love about the intersection of AI and Latin America is I'm incredibly passionate about education. And I do believe that AI will be the equalizer to education. And there's going to be no better technology to basically educate countries and markets where education has been lagging. I mean, education in Latin America for the masses is terrible. And I do believe that with AI, we're going to make an incredible amount of progress. And I'm looking forward in terms of spearheading that and helping, many countries in terms of deploying their AI strategy focused towards education, and this being the great equalizer. From an investment perspective, and I'll just take 30 seconds on this, where I'm focused now is I love the concept of there's so much money that is being deployed today into what I call the supply of AI, and that is data centers, energy, semiconductors, technology and applications. We're talking close to $1 trillion of capital being deployed. But what is happening today in AI is we have a really big problem, and that is the adoption of AI is extremely low. Everybody talks about it wherever you go, but honestly, less than 5% of people actually use AI as their core app in their job. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities today in helping deploy AI, what we like to call in demand side of AI, and helping companies and helping different entrepreneurs launch new companies that will focus on the deployment of AI. So that's apart from my Latin America, I'm focused on that. And Latin America, like I said, is education. Hopefully education will be solved by deploying an AI educational model.
And but I think when we were briefing a little bit, we also talk about the climate conference being next year in the Amazon in Brazil. So is there any general component on the opportunities in agriculture tech or in climate that you definitely like interested and seeing as a trend in Latin America?
Let me go into that in a second sentence. Let me start with taking what Marcelo was talking about with AI, which we all know is a horizontal, not a vertical. And we look at now our 130 portfolio companies very aggressively looking at how we can plug them in to a focus on AI. But what is really remarkable, and we're not in infrastructure investing, Marcelo is in all types of investing. So he's like a catch-all. But it's really interesting that Brazil is probably the cleanest energy grid, and the need for power for generation of AI is astronomical. And when you look at the strategic deal that Microsoft did with G42 in Abu Dhabi, and now you look at the need for data centers and growth that AWS, Amazon, is looking for in Latin America, Brazil specifically, with a clean energy grid, the opportunities there are astronomical. It's not our area of business, but it's another example of how Latin America is at the right place at the right time with the right biodiversity. I think Brazil's leadership hosting the G20 this year and COP30 next year is indicative of the important outsized role that Brazil takes. It takes it very seriously. And I think that you'll see many opportunities coming out of not only the G20, where, for instance, the finance ministers are meeting in Rio in the end of July. And what are they talking about? International settlements. Is the United States leading that charge? No. Where they're protecting a system that will be outdated in years to come. So it's a time the world is changing quickly.
So on closing, I want like one word for 4 quick questions. One word for your relationship.
One word about our relationship.
I know you two have been like working together, investing in each other. One word for your...
Can I say 2?
1.
I needed that. Well, then you
use
can
a
take
dash.
it.
Use a dash. 2 words.
Either exciting or dynamic.
To me, it's friendship. I mean, we have a strong friendship.
So I love that. One word to describe LatAm ecosystem.
Oh, one other thing. We both have great wives.
That's true.
One word to describe LatAm ecosystem.
I'm sorry?
One word to describe LatAm ecosystem.
What word?
LatAm, Latin America ecosystem.
It's thriving for me.
One word for LatAm: venture,
Ecosystem.
ecosystem. Growing exponentially.
Exponential. Name one market you might go next after Latin America.
I'll follow Marcelo. No, I don't mean that. I want to hear what he has to say first.
Where I'm investing, China.
China?
You know, I do believe that there's tremendous opportunity in China, and the market is highly undervalued today.
I look at the Middle East.
Middle East. Okay, final question. Is LatAm frontier or unlocked?
Depends on what.
Love it.
Agreed. Logistics, it's a frontier. Digital finance, it's on the leading edge.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Marcelo and Ambassador Cliff. It's a pleasure to moderate your session.
Thank you.